U.S. Navy helicopter air crews from two different vessels found themselves in a firefight on Sunday morning upon answering a distress call from a Singaporean cargo ship traversing the Red Sea. This cargo ship was under attack for the second time in less than 24 hours by Houthi forces. And as U.S. Navy helicopters attempted to warn those attack boats to disperse, the attack boats opened fire, forcing the Navy helicopters to return fire, sinking 3 of those boats immediately and leaving the 4th in a retreat. Let's briefly summarize how this attack played out, why it took place, and what U.S. Navy military systems were likely involved in the engagement. Now, it's important to understand that these Yemen-based Houthi forces have been pretty indiscriminately attacking both commercial and naval vessels traversing the Red Sea since November, and they've been doing so in support of Hamas. Now, back on October 7th, Hamas launched an attack on a number of Israeli towns, prompting Israel to respond with a very controversial ground offensive into Gaza, a Palestinian enclave within Israeli territory. Now, many people have since come online to voice support for the Palestinian civilians caught in this crossfire. But regardless of whether or not you support Palestine, it's very important to understand that these Houthi rebels are not the good guy. In fact, according to the Human Rights Watch, these Houthi forces have not only indiscriminately targeted civilians and children throughout the civil war in Yemen, which it's important to note has seen human rights violations on all sides, but they have also forced thousands of these children to take up arms for their cause. These Houthi rebels don't care about Palestinian civilians. They care about advancing Iranian foreign policy objectives. In fact, they are considered an Iranian proxy force. In other words, they are armed, trained, equipped, and to a large extent take their orders from the Iranian government. Their goals are not to protect Palestinian civilians, but rather to advance Iranian objectives and wage war on the West. And right now, those goals happen to align. But the overlap is coincidental, and it's very important to understand that. Now, according to media reports and statements made by the crew of the commercial vessel, this ship was attacked by a Houthi anti-ship missile less than 24 hours prior to this attempt to seize the vessel. Now, that initial attack seemed to do little damage, as the shipping company reported there were no fires on board, and they were continuing on their way to try to get out of the Red Sea. And that's when they were approached by 4 armed Houthi attack boats. Now, according to DoD reports, these Houthi attack boats were armed with crew-served weapons and a variety of small arms. Now, crew-served weapons are usually larger machine guns that require more than one person to operate. Some common crew-served weapons in U.S. service include the M240 machine gun and the M250 cal. They usually have at least 3 people operating them, a gunner, an assistant gunner, and an ammunition bearer, though we don't know exactly what crew-served weapons were on these Houthi attack boats. Now, those boats opened fire on this commercial ship, and the commercial ship actually had a small security contingent on board that returned fire, which bought the U.S. Navy time to scramble helicopters to respond. Now, we don't know exactly what helicopters were scrambled, but we do know they came from the USS Eisenhower, a Nimitz-class supercarrier, as well as the USS Gravely, which is an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer. Now, these helicopters were certainly either an MH-60S or an MH-60R. These are the naval variant of the legendary Black Hawk helicopter, commonly known as Seahawks in Navy service. Now, the MH-60S is a general utilitarian platform, whereas the MH-60R is a specialized helicopter designed for anti-submarine warfare, and it comes a bit better equipped for combat. Now, these Houthi attack boats had closed to within 20 meters of the commercial ship for this engagement, which is around 60 feet. The U.S. Navy helicopters reportedly attempted to issue commands telling them to disperse when the Houthis turned their fire toward the helicopters. And immediately upon taking fire, the U.S. Navy responded in kind, rapidly sinking 3 boats and killing 10 of the Houthi combatants, leaving the 4th to scramble out of there. Now, regardless of whether these helicopters were MH-60Ss or MH-60Rs, often called Romeos, they both are capable of carrying their own crew-served weapons, either M240s or M250 cals. But the MH-60R comes with a whole lot more than that. It's also capable of carrying Mark 54 anti-submarine torpedoes, as well as up to 8 AGM-114 Hellfire air-to-surface missiles. Now, in order to make all that firepower work effectively, the Romeo also carries the Telephonics APS-147 multi-mode radar for targeting on or above the surface, as well as the AN/AQS-22 airborne low-frequency sonar that allows them to target enemy combatants below the surface as well. This rotorcraft flies with the AN/ALQ-210 electronic support measure system, which is a very effective situational awareness and electronic intelligence gathering system. It effectively scans the area looking for threats, identifying them, and soaking up electronic signal intelligence, or ELINT, for further analysis later. In other words, it allows the pilots to have a great deal of situational awareness and also allows these platforms to serve as reconnaissance helicopters when you want to collect information about a target area. Now, that system feeds directly into the AAS-44 forward-looking infrared electro-optical targeting system for the pilots that allows them to not only look around in infrared, but even identify targets for their onboard Hellfire missiles. Now, like all of the US military's S-60 series helicopters, these platforms are considered tolerant of small arms fire and even medium caliber high explosive projectiles, meaning the Houthis didn't stand much of a chance. Now, the main rotor blades of these helicopters are designed to withstand impacts from rounds as big as 23 millimeters, and these MH-60s fly with triple redundant hydraulic and electronic systems, redundant fail-safe rotor controls, self-sealing fuel tanks, and spall-resistant cockpit glass to prevent them from shattering when impacted by enemy rounds. In other words, these utilitarian helicopters can absorb a ton of punishment and stay airborne, making them extremely well suited for engagements of this sort. Now, this appears to be the first, if not one of very few surface engagements actually carried out by these rotorcraft, at least to date. But we could see more of just these sorts of engagements if tensions continue to boil over in the Red Sea, which is a vital shipping lane that sees about 12% of the world's commerce shipped across its surface per year. Now, in mid-December, the US launched Operation Prosperity Guardian, which they say has involvement from more than 20 other nations, intended to protect these shipping lanes from just these sorts of Houthi attacks. But as the war in Israel continues, there's a good chance we'll see tensions on the Red Sea continue to escalate, and that means this may be just the beginning.